Hi, this is Christina McNamee from App Properties. Today is Monday, April 27th, which is the sixth Monday of the shelter in place order. I know last week in my video, I was optimistic about the economy starting to reopen, as well as the number of new contracts increasing week to week. But since then, Governor Pritzker has extended the shelter in place order through the end of May. So very quickly, I am going to give you the market comparison of April 2019 to April 2020, the third week, which would be April 14th through the 20th, for our three neighborhoods, which are Lincoln Park, Lakeview, and North Center. So when we look at the new listing data, new listings were down 55% for that third week in April 2020 in comparison to 2019, as sellers continue to hold their listings off the market. New contracts were also down year over year. However, new contracts were up 47% the third week of April 2020 in comparison to the first week when the shelter in place was just brand new. And then from closing data, the closings remain pretty much the same. So the 2020 numbers were almost exactly mirroring the 2019 days on market, and sales price to list price ratio were pretty steady from 2019 to 2020. So since real estate is considered an essential business under the shelter in place order, I have invited one of my favorite attorneys, Greg Braun, to join me today to discuss what he is seeing on the attorney front. So I'd like to welcome Greg to the video call today.
Hey, Christina, good to be here.
First, I wanted to thank you for keeping the transactions that we've been doing together since the shelter in place together. Thankfully, the transactions that we've had have already closed or are close to closing, and I know others haven't been as lucky. Have you seen an increase in cancellations of contracts since the coronavirus?
In the first few weeks I saw a lot of cold feet. There were two principal reasons for cancellation. And pardon me, my dog is requiring that I pet him while I do this. So the first reason for cancellations was simply just job loss. Some of the folks went from salary to commission, or they saw a 10 or 20% loss of income, or just a termination. And then the other reason for contract terminations, I think, was just the cold feet factor. They got cold feet a few weeks into the contract, and when the disclosures came in from the condominium association, they used that as a pretext to get out because they didn't feel confident about their decision to purchase.
And when you were going through the negotiations, like at the beginning of the year when it was a normal real estate market, to contracts that were coming in right before the shelter in place or during the shelter in place, did you see that the attorney reviews were negotiations were taking longer, or were buyers asking for extra concessions?
I think that trend just continued. Certainly in January, for instance, negotiations were taking a long time. The inspections came in very, very critical, and we were having longer attorney reviews because the buyers were having additional inspections from different specialists, whether it be a sewer repair or an electrician. And now with the COVID, the reviews are coming in, and buyers just think that they have the advantage, and the review list, the repair list is exhaustive.
Mm-hmm. And then the contracts that you are seeing go to the closing table, how is the closing changed for you since the shelter in place?
So the closings are no longer closing events like they used to be. It used to be that everybody was at the closing, the lender, the realtors, and maybe even the buyer had a rooting section, a father, a mother, little kids. Now it's just the closing agent and the buyers that need to sign on the mortgage document. So, and those are taking two forms. Either the buyers are showing up curbside, where literally the closer is coming out, handing them an envelope of documents that are pre-tabbed and the buyer signs it and slips it back through the window, or the closer's in one room and the buyer is in another room. And what we're doing, though, to make the process quicker so that they're at that signing appointment half the time, is we're getting documents ahead of time. We're making sure that all the numbers are accurate days ahead of time, and going through the closing package the night ahead so that the buyer knows exactly what they're signing and they don't have me slowing them down explaining the documents at the closing appointment.
So you're having conversations the day before explaining, hey, this is what you're going to expect. And then when they pull up curbside, are you on the phone with them on FaceTime, or just taking a phone call and saying, okay, pull this page, sign here, initial here?
Somewhat. The buyers have already been prepped, so the phone calls are very brief. They might have forgotten like where to sign somewhere or needed another brief explanation about some fact, but we're only on the phone for a few minutes. But everything's getting done ahead of time. And we're also setting the stage. So we're telling them, okay, park here. Here's this closer's cell number. The closer's going to have a mask on, so don't be freaked out about that. So we're just kind of setting the stage so that the buyer knows exactly what to do and when to do it. And we're just trying to make it no surprises, just a one-take closing. We're not trying to change numbers in the middle of things, and really just be really conscientious about how the numbers and how everything's getting set up so we can do it on one take.
Are you finding this process is easier than how it was before?
It's easier in certain ways. That's a good way to think of it. It's easier because we're prepared and we're doing it on one take. It's harder because I have to have several conversations with the closer, with the lender, and then with the buyer. So I'm probably doing twice as much work. The only benefit for me is I'm not traveling as much, but the same amount of work or more is there.
Got it. So let me flip the script a little bit and let's talk about landlords and rental properties as we get into like the May, June, and July months, which in Chicago is the prime time for leases to turn over. What do you have? What advice do you have for landlords? Can a landlord show a tenant occupied property to try and find a new tenant to put in its place when that lease expires?
Under the governor's order, tenant occupied properties are not able to be shown even if the tenant consents. So no, the only way that the property could be shown is if the tenant somehow assists in a video of the property.
And so in addition to new showings, are agents able to go into these properties? Is the landlord themselves able to go in these properties during the shelter in place?
No, the landlords and their agents aren't able to go into the properties even for routine maintenance. It's really got to be an emergency.
Emergencies only.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you recommend for a landlord that has a lease coming due and they don't necessarily want to renew the lease with that tenant? Can they not renew during the shelter in place?
Yeah, the landlord's not forced to renew the lease. They have to give notice of non-renewal based on the ordinance, the landlord-tenant ordinance. And so normally speaking, you have to give that at least 30 days in advance. But I think you have to be talking to your tenant, because at this point, the evictions are not proceeding until after May. So really what you have to do is have a good working relationship with your tenant, and you have to be communicating and working out how you're going to handle this transition, because unlike other years, this year, there's no help from the courthouse. You are really going to have to do as best you can, negotiating and working things out on your own, because you really are on your own until May is over. And even then, there's going to be a big line at the courthouse. So you're really, really best served working it out with your tenant in some form or fashion.
So try and get ahead of, even though the landlord tenant ordinance says 30 days, it might be advantageous to start having those conversations maybe 60 or 90 days out if we know that the lease is going to turn over or one party doesn't want to renew. You did mention evictions, so I know there's been a lot in the news about don't pay your rent or protests against rent payments. What recourse does a landlord have right now if their tenant can't pay?
Again, since the courthouse is closed until the end of May, the best that a landlord could do is kind of explain that I still have my tax expenses, my water, gas, mortgage expenses. And most tenants, by the way, are paying well over half into the 70, 80. I even have landlords that are into the 90% collection. So I think that notion that tenants aren't paying, I think that is overstated.
Okay, but sounds like it's best off to keep that line of communication open with the tenants if they do lose a job or take a hit in income, to work that out directly with them, because it doesn't sound like the courthouse or Cook County is going to be able to assist anytime soon.
Absolutely. Work it out with your tenant. If your tenant needs some concession off the rent, that is a better outcome than getting into conflict with your tenant.
Certainly. Well, thank you for joining me. I certainly miss seeing you since I haven't been allowed to go to closings during the shelter in place. That's the only time we get to catch up. So it was good to see you face to face, and stay well, be well, and hugs to you and your family.
Great. And when I see you next, I have a big gift for the closing.
Oh, good. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye, Christina.